Totally forgot. Go for it.
Okay. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I don't know if that's Marcus.
Marcus, can you make Latricia a host so she can share?
I cannot. This is the CCI account.
Oh, it's my meeting. I can do it. Sorry. Go.
Am I good now?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. All right. So, what I thought I would share with y'all today is a vision for where we're wanting to go in terms of how the community engagement team is organized. And so, obviously, this has several different levels of engagement for our team. And so I'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top. So in order to really center equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to be able to understand kind of where we're at today and where we're going, one of the things that we're wanting to look at is making sure that we have good quality demographic data for both board and commission and CPO members. So this just helps us get a picture, a snapshot of where we are, who's engaged, who's not engaged, where we want to grow going forward. One of the next level up, one of the things that is really important, I think, for me and for the community engagement team is that we do begin to build out and develop culturally specific relationships and networks. And that's really to help support outreach and engagement work to diversify both boards and commissions and to support CPOs in your effort to diversify. So, and then also to help with the county as we do more work in terms of employee and supplier diversity. So this all represents a journey that we're all on. This isn't really calling any particular entity out. We are all on a journey. We have a organizational need to improve in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So the community engagement team really building out those relationships with communities that have historically been marginalized from government, from our government institutions, is an essential pillar of the work going forward. We have also been engaged with our board in a way that I think is different. I think maybe Amanda can speak to it a little bit more specifically than I can, but my understanding is that over this past year, the board has reached out to the community engagement team in a way that's somewhat different than in the past, and really leaned on the community engagement team to provide more access to Washington County community members, particularly related to COVID, but also to community responses to the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement that really stepped up as a result of that, as well as engagement around issues like body-worn cameras and our budget process. So really understanding community priorities. So we're also being asked to formalize that relationship between the community engagement team and the Board of County Commissioners, because they absolutely recognize the value of the community engagement team providing that support. There was one more thing I wanted to say about that, but it just is slipping my mind right now.
Yeah.
So the other piece that I thought I had it, but it escaped me again. The other element of the work within the community engagement team is to continue our investment in the Civic Leaders Program and to really look at evaluating the results and the impact of civic leaders, as well as making sure that we have policy and strategy in place so that when people from diverse backgrounds graduate out of the civic leaders program, that they have a pathway onto boards and commissions or into CPOs. And sometimes that works and people get engaged with us, and sometimes people engage with other jurisdictions or run for elected office, or maybe the timing isn't quite right, and so they're tracking and following but not exactly jumping in to the ring with other folks from civic leaders. So we are wanting to continue that, and then continue the strategy of really implementing the civic leaders program in partnership with community-based organizations. And we're looking at renewing that funding cycle and making that funding available potentially to other organizations as well. The next level up is really focusing on where we need to provide tailored recruitment that's culturally specific for CPOs, boards, and commissions. And so that looks like both working directly with departments and board and commission liaisons to identify specifically the expertise, the areas of expertise that they are looking for on the various boards and commissions, as well as the priorities, for example, of different CPOs who maybe want to have a broader look at engagement with the county versus some that maybe want a narrower approach of engagement with the county, but really tailoring our recruitment based on relationships with folks to match the needs of the different bodies that are opening up to more diverse engagement. So an example of that is like the farm board, right? Is there an opportunity to do culturally specific engagement outreach for people who may not have thought of themselves? Maybe they represent farm workers or have experience in their life at some point or in their family around being a migrant or seasonal farm worker, that they could actually participate on the farm board. Or similarly with like assessment, property tax appeals, reaching out to people, professionals of color who have a background in accounting or a legal background or real estate or being an appraiser, and engaging them specifically to participate on that board and commission, because that's the skill set of the board and commission. So in some ways, our community engagement team is doing broad relationship building as well as very grassroots education for people who may have been marginalized from government because of education or national origin or a number of other factors. And the community engagement team is also going to be identifying and reaching out to many people who are also highly seasoned professionals from various walks of life to engage them in other ways as well. And so maybe for those members of those communities, it's just been the lack of an invitation or a concern about process or the impact that they could have and whether their voice would be valued or heard. And it could also be that those individuals are in high demand. And so why would they participate on this board when they're being recruited to all these other boards? Finally, the top of the pyramid, so recognizing that this is the history and the work for a long time of the community engagement team, is maintaining support for the CPOs and the boards and commissions. What's changing here is our focus and our intention. So the focus of community engagement going forward as a part of the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement is how do we center equity, diversity, and inclusion in the support that we provide for CPOs and boards and commissions. And so that might look like, how do we build out countywide policy for incentives and support for people to participate So things like travel stipends or, what's the word? Some sort of acknowledgement that there may be childcare costs or there may be time costs where people may have to take time away from their work or their family to participate in the boards and commissions. And so really thinking about what are the policies that need to be in place to support this. The other part of support would be around creating environments that are welcoming. And so being able to train board leadership related to how to create a welcoming practice, both in terms of decision making or demystifying some of the jargon, or how to interrupt comments that are maybe uncivil or disrespectful or insensitive. So really thinking about how do we build capacity within the various structures that exist to be more welcoming and inclusive. So this is really the direction that we are wanting to go as community engagement and as the Office of Equity, Inclusion and Community Engagement, is to continue to walk alongside CPOs in partnership to create a CPO structure that is more diverse, more welcoming, and where we see more engagement across the board from residents of Washington County. So I'll pause there and take any questions you may have.
I have a question. Well, it's more of an explanation. My name is Ellen Partel, and I am the de facto communications CCI's subcommittee communications chair. And so having done that, I volunteered to put together an updated press list, if you will, but it doesn't include just the press. It also includes, for instance, the Latino publications and the different organizations within Washington County that are of the same marginalized people that haven't been participating in the CPOs at all. But it's become cumbersome and difficult because when people do commit to wanting more information about the CPOs or the CCI, it doesn't go to us, it goes to CE, and we do not see that information. So we can't know what's effective and what isn't effective because we don't know who's joining us. And so when we send out our monthly meetings, or minutes or whatever, we don't know who they're going to via the email addresses because we don't have public, we don't see that. Does that make sense? And then the other thing is we've gotten away from doing, say, the sandwich boards outside where the meetings might be if they were held in public, or the newspapers or those kind of things, paper flyers. So people that maybe don't have the internet, which would include communities that are, not necessarily, have internet in their home, although most do now, but it's not something they would see, or that they don't participate in Nextdoor or Facebook, won't know about our meetings. So we can't include them because we don't have a clear line of communication that we can develop. So that's a concern that I feel.
Can you make me the host again, please?
Oh, sure. I can also
I don't
stop
think we need
sharing.
to keep this back up, do we?
What?
We don't need to keep this picture up. Thank you. Yeah, so go ahead if you want and answer Ellen's question, but I have a couple of questions too.
And I'm behind you.
Are you talking to me? I'm sorry.
So yeah, let me
I'm done.
pitch that question. Thank you, Ellen.
I just wanted to throw that out there so that you could understand where we're in trying to harness this and include everyone.
I think our biggest question that we've been kind of discussing offline is how does this fit with Oregon's Goal 1 objectives in terms of the CPO system helping community members participate in land use decisions. Are we forgetting about that? Is that just not modern enough for us to be, you know, for that to be our focus? Are we sweeping goal 1 under the rug?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that even though the legislation was silent on diverse representation in goal 1, I think that our focus is around maintaining and achieving the goals of goal 1 by focusing on increasing the diversity of CPO membership.
And then my other question, and this may seem really trivial, but it's really important. When the people go through the cohort of civic leaders, is Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure included in that training? Because it's been very instrumental in having democratic meetings for 150, 200 years. It's been working for a really long time. And I've heard various people, including CE staff, saying that employing Robert's Rules of Orders and parliamentary procedure was off-putting for new attendees. But I don't see how we can conduct our meetings if we throw that out the window. And it seems like it would be a crucial component of the civic leaders training to at least give an introduction to that. And I mean, you know, how do people get recognized in a meeting? How do we take votes? You know, a free-for-all just doesn't work. And Roberts is almost embedded in the Constitution as far as I'm concerned. And I'm hoping that that's part of the content. Just a comment, we have one of our members of our CCI steering committee who came through the training, and it seems to me in some ways that people are jumping into committees just because they can, but without an agenda or without issues that they care about. They just want to be on the committee. And that's fine. I mean, having a diverse population in all of our groups is great, but just sitting there in a chair doesn't really accomplish much. So that's what I have to say. And welcome other people to make their comments and questions.
Virginia, you laid out a bunch of stuff in a not a very neutral kind of way, and I'd be really interested in what Latricia has to say to respond to those.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. So there are a number of points that you made. One about Robert's Rules of Order, question about how do people vote if not for Robert's Rules of Order. You had a concern about whether it would be a free-for-all and that it's been working for 200 years. And a number of those things, it kind of carry multiple perspectives on that. So one, I think, when I think about equity, diversity, and inclusion along a 200-year timeline, there are many things that did not work for all Americans over the past 200 years. So just because it's been around for 200 years doesn't mean that it's an equitable process or that it resonates and lands equally well for all communities. So I would just share that just, you know, there are many things that have been around for a long time that have their history
Well,
at their core not being equitable.
The
other thing that I would offer is that there are very many other cultures who have decision-making processes that don't use Robert's Rules of Order, right? Many cultures are consensus-based culture. Many have a particular hierarchy, an order for speaking. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. What I'm saying is you, Virginia, and others may be very comfortable with Robert's Rules of Order because it's part of your culture, because it's part of the way you were acculturated into civic engagement. That may not be true for other people. That doesn't mean that they're chaotic or not committed to decision making or not committed to an orderly decision making process. So I think in part that even the way that the question is being laid out might be an example of part of the challenge around creating a diverse and inclusive environment, right? Because the supposition is, if you're coming into this group, you're coming in this way. And if you're not coming in this way, then it's going to lead to chaos or a free-for-all. So I think some of that, and I have an understanding of Robert's Rules of Order. I understand the purpose of Robert's Rules of Order. What I'm just saying is that the weddedness to a particular approach, it's an approach, may not work. And that's true for all communities. It's just true. So the question is how, maybe because this is something that's been very practiced within this group, and this group, the current group, is very comfortable with it. I think one of the things that we can do is start looking at how are other groups making decisions? What are other decision-making processes that are working and creating equity, diversity, honoring diversity, and helping people feel more included in a decision-making process? As we move forward, it might not be something that is inherently comfortable to this group if it represents a change of how we do things. But we're also asking people who have historically not engaged in government to step into some discomfort to come into this group that has a history and a process as well. So I would just say that the way forward is probably somewhere in the middle between how things have been done by this group for a long time and how things may need to evolve so that other people can feel welcome.
Yeah, I see a basic dichotomy between people coming into the culture and becoming Americans and people coming in and changing America. And I'm not saying that we don't want change in America, but I also am wary of just dumping out the baby with the bathwater. I'm
Virginia?
being very frank here.
Virginia, you've made your point.
Some other
Okay.
people want to talk.
Yes,
Action.
yes. Well, first of all, Latricia, I am a trained mediator and have done a lot of it much of my adult life. It's very important to try to develop consensus, but that works very well in a small group. It doesn't work as well in a large meeting environment. I've tried to do it both ways, and I've learned how things work. And I've worked with a lot of people from the Hispanic culture, from Asian cultures. So I see the way in the middle, but consensus doesn't always work in a large meeting. Now, to my actual question. My question is, I come from a city environment. Several of our CPOs are partly or totally in cities. And one of the issues that I have seen has been the difficulty of communicating between city government and county government and citizens who are involved in CPOs, having to deal with rules that are different between the two governments. And I think one of the things that would really be helpful for community engagement is to have a way to try to bridge some of these inconsistencies and help folks to understand what's going on. And I'm going to work at it from the other side to try to, as the code gets updated, to try to bring some more consistency between the way that cities do the same thing in planning. So I think you understand my question is we've really got a disconnect, and it makes it very difficult for everybody, let alone someone who is not from the WASP culture. Did my question make sense to you?
I didn't hear
I
it.
heard us.
No, I did ask a question. How could community engagement assist in dealing with these
Cities?
discrepancies that people don't understand why there's a discrepancy?
You mean just the difference between urban unincorporated county and cities? I'm sorry. Still
The
not-
county is not all unincorporated. You have to remember, a lot of CPOs are partly in cities.
That's,
And this is my there's a terrible disconnect. And the county does not communicate well with cities, despite cities' efforts. And I'm trying to ask this issue, Latricia, of how community engagement might be able to help people to understand. John Q. Person, and Virginia, let Latricia respond.
So there was information in your question that I don't feel able to respond to right now, which is the statement you made about county not being in good communication with specific cities, and then how does that impact community? I'm not really
When you've got
sure.
people dealing with two
yeah,
conflicting systems.
I think that's something we can take offline and work on. It's not inconsequential, but I'd really like to hear what Paul has to say. He's had his hand up forever.
Well, let me just answer to you, Gretchen. I do think that one of the things that, because I think our civic leaders program is specifically focused on how do we engage folks into Washington County processes. That's part of the orientation that we want to focus on. I do think there probably is some opportunity to acknowledge and recognize that folks who go through a Washington County civic leader program may not end up in a Washington County decision-making body, may end up in another jurisdiction's decision-making body, and we didn't prepare them for that. There also may be times when an issue cuts across jurisdictions, and then we would also need to have that kind of conversation around how might that be different. How might the decision-making process look? I know for me, I worked both county and state, and the public policy processes are very different.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that, I do think is very important. I think it's very empowering for community members to understand how policy decisions get made so that they know when and how to engage. So I think it's a great point. I don't have a quick answer for that, but
No,
I think that is something that we can note.
Quick answer. I think it's something that specifically could be addressed in the leadership training.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
My turn?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, well, one of those things that I recognize, having served in the Peace Corps and in a situation where I was embedded in an entirely different culture, and the difficulty of bridging that culture, and I've also taken classes in the area of going intercultural communication. So I'm somewhat aware of some of the issues that make it difficult to communicate. If you're not from the same culture, your rules are different. Both the explicit and implicit rules of the culture are different. Being able to express what the rules are of another culture in a way that the culture one is in is inherently difficult. So I appreciate what Latricia has to do here in order to bridge all of these things. They're not easy things to do. And when you spoke of Robert's Rules of Order, I think how you're going to bridge this is look at the rules from the standpoint of the culture of the person that you're talking to, and see if there's a way you can express the rule that will be meaningful to them. That's part of what going to have to happen in order to make things work. Uh, Expecting them to follow your rules just the way you lay them out, you know, the expectations, you can spell out your expectations, doesn't mean that they have been understood. So, because of the differences in culture. So the struggle, it really is one of being able to clearly communicate in a way that reaches the culture that you're talking to. And I could see from the standpoint of our CPOs, how do we engage more people where they may not share all the elements of the culture that they have transplanted themselves into. We need to reach out in a way where we're sensitive to those cultural differences. And that is not an easy thing to do. It's a challenge for all of us to do that. For those who have spent time in the third world, they're probably more aware of it than others, because they not only had to reach out to another culture, they had to learn the language. They had to learn something about the art, the politics, the way family groups work, and things like that. Where I was in Africa, one of those areas that was different here, when they talked about the legitimacy of children, when they referred to their relatives, their aunts and uncles were their mothers and fathers. They made no distinction. They were treated all the same. Every culture has some element that is different about it that makes the difference, whether you can communicate effectively.
I'm sorry, you've made your point, but Latricia has a limited amount of time. I believe
Yeah.
she needs to leave soon.
I have some questions.
Go ahead, Bruce, but I just have one quick thing, which is when the CPO system was under the OSU extension, we looked at the OSU extension office as kind of our staff, and they took care of more or less clerical duties for us, making sure that meetings got announced and that things worked. And as this whole thing has been moving, first we were under CE, and then we were under something, and now we're under everything. And I feel like that pyramid is upended, and we get what's left over when all those other goals are dealt with. And we've been frustrated with the lack of that clerical support. And I'm wondering if we should just get used to that, or if that's something that's very low priority for the whole EIQE, whatever community. But Bruce, go ahead.
Latricia, thank you for coming and presenting. I'm wondering if the pyramid that you presented is posted with a narrative that describes it any. One of the things I've been interested in is getting a little bit more information on the direction of CE sort of as it develops, so we get a better feeling and better understand how to work with it. So is that kind of information on the community engagement website?
It probably isn't there now. It is definitely something that we can work on so that you do get a better kind of narrative sense of where we're going.
Very good. As I think about Robert's Rules of Order, my mind goes to the Board of County Commissioners, who has a very established procedure. And I would be very interested in knowing what kinds of things you're doing to that procedure to make it more welcoming and engaging to people in other cultures. And if you don't have an answer right now, just kind of keep it in mind that share with us what you're advising the county commissioners to do that. I've been on a number of boards since the early 90s. I was on the Behavioral Health Council, and I've seen many members come and go, and I've always found it to be a very welcoming process where we're grateful for anybody who shows up. I also have been on the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District Advisory Committee for 10 years, and I chair it last year and this year. And I find that we're looking for people to be involved. And so it would be helpful to know what kinds of information or what kinds of processes you would recommend that we make to make it more welcoming. It would be helpful. I was, as part of the Sheriff's Advisory Council, we supported the listening sessions the commissioners did on the body-worn cameras. And I went to the listening sessions in the BIPOC and the LGBTQ listening sessions. And one of the things that really struck me is that body-worn cameras in this county were not at the tops of the list of needs of those two communities. And I think that having another set of listening sessions where the question is, what is important to you, would be very informative to get, rather than saying, what do you think about this? It's like, tell us what is important. And we might hear that food, housing, medical, transportation are the things that really mean the most. And so that's my, any of those things that spawn a response, I'd be welcome to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah,
That reminds me
sure.
that one of your topics was going to be sharing the results of that survey.
So I'll be actually presenting on it tomorrow for the Board of County Commissioners, but at a high level today, what I can share is that there were close to 500 or so responses, and I think it confirmed what we already what I've already heard from other folks, which is that we have a lot of work to do in terms of representing the diversity of Washington County on the in our CPOs.
Is the raw material ever going to be shared with us?
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Absolutely. Let me just say that, Bruce, to your points, I'm not opposed. I don't have a personal opposition to Robert's Rules of Order. I think that there are definitely ways that we can engage community in using that structure, and we don't have to be 100% wedded to that structure to have engaging processes. So I think what is actually going to encourage people to join and to feel welcome is extends well beyond the decision-making process. And it comes through in the attitudes and the words that are spoken by leadership. And those are the people beyond the actual written or spoken words comes the tone and the approach. And those are the kinds of things that tell people whether or not this is a safe place to be, where people are going to want to spend their time and engage. And I think that is probably the number one thing to be paying attention to in terms of, as you asked about strategies and best practices for making people feel welcome, is to actually have that kind of a tone and an attitude of being welcoming and being interested in people and what they bring to the table and their strengths, and which includes, of course, their culture. And their journey and their pathway. And so I think that really is at the heart of what we're wanting to do and what we're wanting to encourage. There was a question in the chat, which I'll answer, and then I am access to your lists. Oh, so your question, Ellen, about who's getting what and who's responding.
We've never been able to send emails to the people who sign up for our CPO. It always has been mediated by the office. And
okay. And my understanding is that at this point, you all are getting, each CPO is getting their own or having access to a CPO Zoom.
Yes.
Right? Is that correct?
Well,
so when people
Go ahead.
when people log into a Zoom call, then you would have all of those emails
No,
of
we're
who's actually
talking
coming.
about, there's
No, we don't have access to those.
hundreds of people who have signed up for each CPO, but the leaders don't get to email those people. We have to be mediated by the office. And if we want to communicate directly with the people in our CPO, we can't. We
Oh,
can't.
okay.
And
Well,
we're
let me follow up. Let me
And-
follow
and
up with
thank
staff and
you.
we'll get an answer about that. I don't,
Yeah, we don't get access.
not
to
sure
this.
exactly.
The CPOs use one account to set up their Zoom meetings, and it's through CE. It's not our own account. CCI has their own account.
But it's
Okay.
that's only
We
the
don't have
people who
access.
show up for the meeting.
Virginia, hold on one second. And then when they respond online through there's a little notice form that they can ask for more information. I don't know where that goes because I submitted one and I never got a response to it. So I'm not sure if it's going into a blank hole or not. So I don't know how people are communicating with us, and I don't know how we can communicate with them without opening up some lines.
Okay. So Marcus is
Thank you.
on, he's hearing that, noting that. Why don't I follow up with Marcus and Amanda and we'll see how we can do that.
Latricia, could I set up a meeting with you offline? I have a couple other issues and I don't want to take up other people's time to discuss with you.
Sure.
Could you email me your email?
Marcus can connect us.
Great.
See?
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Great.
And I do just want to close with that. We need to keep in mind that CPO was set up with a specific purpose in mind, which was to let people participate in land use in their jurisdiction. And while we've expanded our focus somewhat, I'm not willing to let that go without a fight. And a CPO is not just a group of people sitting around talking. It's a way for people to share information, both about what's going on with land use and how to influence the way the jurisdiction is handling land use. And unfortunately, that involves people being educated about how things work. And just having everybody jump in and start talking about land use without some background is hard. And so, I mean, I think Ellen found and shared the actual content of the law. And I hope I shared that with you guys. I sent it off to be shared with you. And I think it's good for all of us to read that and refresh our memories once in a while, that the CPO system is not just some arbitrary group. It was set up by state law to perform some tasks. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind. So I hope you got that. Did you get that information? And if not, I'll have Marcus send it again.
Oh, I'm 100% aware of the law. I've read the law. I've seen it. Yeah, no, I don't need education about that. And, you know, I think that what's really important to note is that when we talk about centering equity, diversity, and inclusion, land use and transportation affects everybody. And people are very clear how land use and transportation affects them in their lives. And I don't think that that's probably the issue around why people aren't engaging. So I think we really have to listen to the people that we aren't hearing from to really understand why they're not participating. And so, you know, I think that for us, the focus is going to be going forward, how can we walk in partnership with the CPOs around how to increase diversity and inclusion within your processes, your decision-making, how you engage folks, the things you talk about, what gets on the agenda, all of that, understanding that this falls within goal 1 of the land use laws.
That sounds great.
And then the other question is like really tracking how we're doing over time and what's that in what's the impact of the work that we're doing, and what's the willingness, what's the quality of the partnership going forward.
One of the old criteria was, they called it butts in seats. But now I guess we have squares on Zoom. And since the Zoom meetings, participation in CPOs and CCI has vastly increased. So I hope that's finding its way into your metrics.
Oh, yeah, it has. And that's one measure for us. But again, the diversity of the butts in seats, or the diversity of the faces in squares, is really important to us, so that we know that when we're making policy decisions, we're actually representing a diversity of views in what we're advancing. So that's really important to us. It's clearly very important to the board of county commissioners, because that's why they decided to put community engagement under equity and inclusion. So that's how we'll be moving forward from here. Those are our priorities, and we really look forward to working in partnership with all of you. So I appreciate your time, and I'm about 20 minutes over.
Yeah, I know. Is there any chance that we could get a glimpse of because we're told that we take too much of the staff's time, but we never know what they're doing. And it'd be useful for us, not right away, but at some point in the future, to get an overview of all the things that staff is doing and how that relates to what they're doing for the CPO system.
So what I would really encourage you to do is to watch tomorrow. I'm giving the quarterly report to the board on the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And the stars of the show in tomorrow's quarterly report will be the community engagement team. So that's a great way to learn about that. The agenda's already published. The handouts are already online. You don't even actually have to listen. If you just want to look at the handouts, those are online. They're a resource that's available to you. But I do welcome you viewing that. And
Great.
you can absolutely follow up with any of us with any questions you have after that.
Thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Better, but I'll digest it later. Thank you.
All right. Take good care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Has its own lingo. I had to learn land use ease. We all have to learn it.
The thing
Virginia,
is to not use it as a crutch.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was working in India, if you remember the Bhopal explosion back in the day, in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work, I was there working with women judges, lawyers, legislators, on developing rights for women. But the point, I got the point when here I was trying to explain how the American legal system works, i.e. bankruptcy, to these people who, you know, all these people have been killed and injured and da-da-da-da-da. It's tough. And it was a real eye-opening experience for me, like you were talking about, Paul, the different culture and the background. And I think it may be a better mediator in that I can sit down and explain things on a one-on-one or, you know, to a small group of people. But it's hard to do that in a large meeting environment. It's very hard. And maybe the way to deal with it is that you have a mini land use 101 for new incoming CPO members. So you can explain some of the acronyms and some of the weird, there are weird things about how land use law works. I don't know. I mean,
or maybe you don't have to have a meeting. You just have a sheet. I mean, it could even be posted on the CPO website that talks about, you know, these are the here's some history so you can participate fully.
Gives them the basics. Yeah. But I do understand the difficulty. But on the other hand, in a large meeting, it's really hard to address those kinds of issues.
I think movies as one of the ways that people learn about culture,
Yeah.
broadly speaking. And if they are using the language of the culture they're trying to speak to about something, it makes a huge difference. This is not something that everybody is able to do. When you want to talk to somebody, if you know, and you don't speak Tagalog, well, that's tough. Now
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. And we're doing a pretty good job for the Hispanic population. You know, almost everything's in Spanish, and there are so many, you know, bilingual people who can talk to the folks in their own language, which really helps. But that doesn't deal with folks who come from other cultures where there isn't any assistance. So, yeah.
I would disagree.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Go ahead.
Well, nothing's
I
perfect.
guess,
We can talk about it later. Not
yeah,
important.
I feel like people come to America because it's America. And they like the way things get done here, I think. And if we're gonna completely dump how we do things so that it's comfortable for all the immigrants, I don't know why people are coming. I mean, it's more than economics, I hope. And I get discouraged when, I mean, I'm a communicator and a language person. And if we can't share a language in a meeting, I don't know how we can have a meeting. If we can't share, I mean, I'd like to see a lot more support for people learning English. Personally, the county doesn't do anything. The county does squat. They leave it up to the churches to teach people English. And learning not just the language, but the cultural conventions that let us, you know, I think what America has to teach the world is how to get a bunch of diverse people to accomplish things. And if we're going to throw all that out, I don't know what we're doing, but that's just me spouting. I think we need to get back to our agenda.
Yes.
We have a few other things that we need to think about, which, does anybody have any additions to the list of questions for Stephen Roberts? What I will do is take these and make an email and send it around. And did we lose Paul? Oh. And get any more suggestions if anybody has any now. So we've got, how is the ordinance season changed? How is the ordinance process changing now that there's no season? Plan changes to the guidelines for public involvement in road projects. There's been some concern about when do you have a neighborhood meeting and when do you just throw a plan out onto the road and talk about it. Improved communications, both timing and distribution, to CCIs and CPOs about projects for current planning. And then I said the current state of staffing at LUT and how that's affecting us, your priorities and the project work, and then future plans for the department, new hires and stuff like that.
I'd like to add on to your question about staffing.
Yeah.
From the perspective of how much of the staff is designated to current planning, whether it be transportation. It seems to me the current transportation planning staff somehow functions better than the land use side. You know, how much is dedicated to rural? Because, you know, we have our rural CPOs and their issues are very different in general. I think it would be a good idea for us to really have a handle long term, and it might be a good thing for them to discuss that, because then we could make comments about, gee, is that the right mix? And I think that's been an issue. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Tweaking your question a little bit? Okay,
Yep, I added that. And since Bruce isn't here anymore, I'm taking notes, so hopefully.
I think he was upset.
Yes, he's fed up with me. So I'll put together what I have and send it around, including what you said, and we'll see what we can come up with. The YouTube, I appreciated that you sent that around for everybody, Ellen, and take a look at those channels and pages and stuff. Okay. I wish everybody was here because I'd like to change the meeting date. Waiting until the Monday after the meeting, this week is production week for me, and I hate having to fit another meeting in. And I'm wondering if we can schedule the meetings during the week of the CCI meeting. If I think the original rationale for having the meeting happen after the CCI meeting was so we could address any issues that came up. But
I would have thought it would be useful, and
right, but the other idea would be to have it before the meeting, so we
that's,
do some more.
yeah, that's what I was
meeting.
thinking.
I mean,
Why aren't we having it before the meeting?
Yeah, I don't know. And the time, Mary said she'd be willing, I think, to consider rejoining the steering committee if we could meet at like 4:30 or something, which is fine with me. It does kind of cut into the middle of your day at 3:15, and it was set up that way for Kathy because it fit with their school schedule. She was an educator.
I can't meet on Wednesdays and Thursdays after 4 o'clock because I work nights. So
Right, and I mean, I don't know that any of us consider Friday afternoon sacred anymore. I mean, who's dating?
who could, even if they wanted to?
Yeah. Well, maybe we could consider, and I'll send this around when I send the Stephen Roberts changes because not everybody's here. Greg, I see you're back. Do you have any opinions on changing the CCI steering committee meeting date? Are you there? He's here, but not here.
I don't know, did we lose Paul?
Yeah, Paul left. I hope he's not discussing with me too. I mean, you all can vote me out. But I'm frustrated, I gotta say. I want everybody to participate too, but I don't want to rejigger the whole system just to make it easier. Okay, well, I don't know. Any other new business? Oh, does anybody have any preference over whether we do Google Docs or Dropbox as a place to keep our unratified meeting minutes?
I have no idea about either one of them, so.
Okay, well, I use both of them. Ellen, you're muted.
Gretchen, I'll give you my elevator speech on Cloud Docs
Yeah.
when I see you next. It'll be great. You'll understand it. I do it all the time.
But do you have a preference for Google Docs or Dropbox?
I like Google Docs better.
I like it. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but so does Dropbox.
I like that you can create documents and stuff within Google Docs if you want to.
And
I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, and right, interactive
Yeah,
So we could, like, for example, we could keep a draft minutes and then each one of us could make our own markup on it. And that would make it easier to come up with a group consensus on what the minutes said.
yeah.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Okay, we'll do that. I know how. Any other new business?
I don't think so.
Well, you said Wednesdays and Thursdays are bad for you, Ellen.
Well, just
Um,
after 4 o'clock or like, yeah, 4 o'clock.
So
Well, I just would prefer no more evening meetings
I
than
completely agree. Well,
and I have too often on Wednesday afternoons, I have a meeting at 4:30, a Zoom meeting at
Yeah.
4:30.
well,
really
what if we said Fridays at 4?
Yeah, I like it.
Fine with me. I'm not going anywhere special. Particularly since it's Zoom, you just zoom in and you don't have to drive somewhere to a meeting. I want to keep meeting this way for committee meetings, quite frankly.
Right, so the CCI meeting is the third Tuesday. So what we're proposing would be the third Friday at 4 p.m.
Does that work for you, Virginia?
Yes,
Well, that's assuming that that's before the the CCI meeting.
well, it'll be right after the last CCI meeting.
Okay, all right.
Marcus, does that fit your schedule?
Marcus doesn't work on Fridays, I don't think.
Yeah, it does not, but I'm not important.
You are.
You're very important.
I disagree.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the other, I mean, we're on the Monday after the CCI meeting, and that doesn't work for me very well.
It's probably okay if Marcus isn't at the steering committee meeting because he can pick it all up at the other one, right? The
Does
general.
Highland work on Fridays?
Yes.
It is
But I-
helpful to have a staff person just to answer questions and take things back. So,
Yeah, but I can't commit her to that by any means.
okay.
Could you ask her?
Well, we don't have to do it right now. I'll
Well-
send this an email around with that suggestion and the draft questions for Stephen, and I think that'll do it.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry it wasn't more productive. I'd hoped, first of all, I'd hoped we'd get a little bit more concrete feedback on the survey, because that was one of the topics that we were told she was going to talk about. And I mean, there's a survey is only as good as the questions you ask. And I know Ellen knows that. And I mean, if you're asking questions that are slanted towards who would ever want to go to a boring CPO meeting, that's what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's why we want direct access, Virginia, to the people that are the emails and the stuff that we get, so that we can provide them with warmth and generous offers to come to our meetings so that we can embrace them. So
I know.
and if we need to make the Zoom meetings, maybe we need to put the minutes in different, in the ability to translate them and stuff, then we need to do that. So we need to look at that.
Great.
Don't worry.
Okay, well, this time I'm gonna end the meeting.
Okay.
Bye,
Yeah,
Virginia.
I'm glad
Thank you.
because I have a CPO meeting in an hour. So
Bye, y'all.
bye-bye.
Okay, bye.